Stay with us as we unpack the finds, the mystery, the story they tell, and more. The Jade Mask in the Dark. In early 2022, deep in the Patan region of Guatemala, a team of archaeologists stumbled upon something that would change their understanding of Maya history and possibly give them chills in the process. This 1,700-year-old site was near Chiquiquitam, a place so smothered by jungle that even the sunlight struggled to find its way in. For decades, this land had kept its secrets well until technology gave humans a peek beneath the green blanket. The discovery began not with a shovel, but with LiDAR light detection and ranging, a laser mapping technology that can see through dense vegetation. On their scans, researchers noticed something odd, a shape that didn't match the curves and randomness of nature. It had edges, symmetry, the fingerprints of human hands from centuries ago. Francisco Estrada Belli, a well-known Maya archaeologist, immediately suspected this wasn't just another hill. It was a hidden structure, a pyramid to be exact, concealed for more than 1,000 years. When his team reached the spot, they found an entrance of sorts, but it wasn't their doing. Looters had already been there, digging a tunnel into the pyramid. Thankfully, the robbers had stopped short, barely scratching the surface of what lay within. The heart of the pyramid and its royal tomb remained untouched. When the real excavation began, the team's excitement grew. A narrow passageway twisted down into the darkness, leading to a burial chamber. Time had taken its toll. The stone ceiling had partly collapsed, and centuries of decay clung to the air. Yet astonishingly, much of the tomb's contents had survived, and in the dim light of their lamps, one object stood out immediately. A mosaic jade mask, its green surface catching the light like frozen water. Back in the lab in late June 2022, Estrada Belli carefully examined small blocks of jade known as tesserae. These were no random fragments. In ancient Maya culture, such jade pieces were often fitted together to create burial masks for rulers. Masks meant to honor the dead, connect them to the gods, and project their power into the afterlife. With practiced hands, Estrada began piecing the tiles together. Soon, a face emerged. Spiral eyes, sharp teeth, and an expression that was part divine, part terrifying. But the surprises didn't stop there. A sharp-eyed colleague spotted something strange about a few bones in the chamber. They were covered in fine carvings, delicate yet razor-sharp, likely made using volcanic obsidian glass. Even stranger, 2 of the bones didn't belong to the tomb's main occupant at all. The carvings on them told a story, one that revealed the ruler's name and his connection to the mask. One carving showed a ruler holding up the severed head of a Maya deity. And that deity, it was the same god depicted in the jade mask, spiral eyes, sharp teeth and all. The inscriptions gave the ruler's name, Itsam Kokaj Balam, which translates to sun god, bird, or jaguar. The god he held was Yaj Wayab Chak, a manifestation of the Maya storm god, its name meaning first sorcerer rain god. For Estrada, this was no ordinary discovery. It was a window into a world where kings were not just leaders, but divine intermediaries wielding both political and supernatural power. Estrada Belli's team found more than a few trinkets. Buried with the ruler were over 16 rare mollusk shells, spondylus shells from a spiny oyster that lived in distant seas. To the Maya, these shells were priceless. They were used as money, cut into jewelry, and offered in rituals. Holding one marked someone as powerful, rich, and tied to the wider world beyond Chiquiquitam. But the shells were only part of the story. The team also found bones carved with tiny, careful designs. Some carvings show a man holding a jade mask. That looks exactly like the mask found in the tomb. Others are carved with glyphs, blocks of writing, that researchers believe name the king's father and grandfather. Those names link him to other great cities like Tikal and Teotihuacan. The carvings don't just decorate the bones. They tie this ruler into a web of family and power. These findings change how we see Chiquiquitam. During the king's life, the city wasn't a vast capital. Estrada Belli describes it as a medium-sized city with modest public buildings. Between 10 and 15,000 people lived in the town itself, and another 10,000 lived nearby. Yet the wealth buried with this king shows he held sway beyond those plain buildings. The spondylus shells, the jade mask, and the carved bones speak of trade, influence, and sacred power. There is a quiet thrill to moments like this. It's a tremendous thrill and a privilege, Estrada Belli said. Archaeology can feel like detective work, but it is also a slow unmasking of lives once lived. Each shell, each carved line, each glyph draws a clearer picture of who this king was and how he fit into the Maya world. What comes next matters. The team plans DNA tests on the bones to learn who this man was, where his family came from, and how he was related to other rulers. DNA could confirm the links the glyphs hint at or surprise researchers with new connections. They will also keep digging. The tomb was only one part of the site, and the city could hold houses, workshops, and more tombs that tell how people lived. For now, the jade mask, the carved bones and shiny shells are the loudest voices. They tell of trade routes that reached the sea, of fathers and grandfathers who ruled or married into power, and of a king who wore a mask that tied him to a god. These items show that even a medium-sized city could play a big role in Maya politics and religion. Archaeologists sometimes call a find lucky, and luck helped here. The looters stopped short, leaving the heart of the tomb sealed, but luck alone didn't explain what the team learned. Careful work, patient study, and steady curiosity turned a dark room into a room full of answers. There seemed to be a ritual perfection in how everything was placed inside the tomb. The jade mask sat above a carved femur, as if crown and bone had been linked on purpose. That pairing felt like a message. The king's face and his bloodline were meant to meet the divine. The inscriptions on the bone were short but loaded. One glyph used a sign often tied to rulership, hinting at links to great houses in Tikal and even far-off Teotihuacan. Other bones carried finer marks that looked like family records, names and signs meant to show descent. They claimed this ruler belonged to a powerful line tied across cities. Different materials told different parts of the story. Jade spoke of the heavens and authority. Shells and ceramics spoke of trade and daily life. Bones recorded lineage and ritual. Together they formed a kind of royal shorthand, items chosen to prove who the ruler was and what he meant to his people. The chamber was quiet and focused. The pyramid above had mostly held its shape, and even the partially collapsed ceiling worked in the tomb's favor. Fallen stones created pockets where dust settled and preserved the tiny carved details. In some spots, layers of dust kept painted marks, and fine incisions pristine, so modern specialists could trace the smallest lines. Symmetry was important. The room's focal points drew the eye. The mask at the center, the carved femur below, and ceramic vessels arranged nearby. It suggested the burial was planned by people who knew the right forms for public display in sacred contexts. The inscriptions on the femurs were striking. Though brief, they read like a short royal tale. One clear reading suggested the buried man was honored as both king and a being that had crossed into the sphere of the gods. Paired with the jade mask, likely representing a thunder or storm deity, these texts reinforced a vision of a ruler who was more than mortal. The mask offered divine protection. The bone inscriptions offered lineage and authority. Pottery filled the quieter corners. Unlike the mask's lavish work, most ceramics were plain and local, made by hand in the surrounding community. Chemical tests later showed traces of cacao and fermented maize inside some pots. Those residues point to ceremonial drinks, the kind poured in rites meant to feed or fortify a spirit on its journey. Future readings may reveal political ties and rites lost to time. Taken together, the objects showed a consistent plan: honor the dead, display power, and bind the ruler to gods and ancestors. The tomb was not a random stash of goods. It was a staged message meant to be read by anyone who knew how. Priests, nobles, or visiting allies. Xochquitam sits where three countries almost meet: Guatemala, Mexico, and Belize. A place thick with jungle, and older than anyone walking its paths today. For years people knew ruins were here, but the trees and time hid most of it. Early explorers and archaeologists spotted crumbling stones from the air. They dug in places they could reach, but the full story stayed buried. Everything changed when LiDAR came into play. LiDAR is a laser that flies over the forest and measures the ground below. Think of it as giving an X-ray to the jungle floor, where leaves and vines, block the view. LiDAR draws lines and shapes, pyramids, roads, terraces, even shallow tunnels. For Xochquitam, those laser scans were the map that made modern digging possible. Francisco Estrada Belli and his team used those maps as a treasure guide. The LiDAR data flagged odd shapes, bumps and straight edges that shouldn't be there if nature made them. One anomaly matched an entrance that looters had cut years before. The robbers had tunneled in, but stopped just short of the real prize, a sealed burial chamber. In a way, that half-finished tunnel saved the tomb. It left the innermost room intact. Once they knew where to look, the team slowed down. No big machines, no careless shovels. They worked with brushes, small trowels, and careful measuring tools. Every scrap of soil was screened, every find logged with exact GPS points. The goal was to keep the context where things sat, because in archaeology, where an object is can be as important as the object itself. The tomb itself showed skill. Builders used local limestone cut and fitted with little mortar. Even where the ceiling had partly fallen, the walls held a shape that spoke to good planning and strong hands. The chamber had been sealed with a stone wall that looked hurried, as if someone had rushed to close it up. That odd detail points to a tense time, maybe a sudden death, a threat, or a political crisis that pushed people to lock the king away quickly. This dig wasn't a one-team show. Experts in scripts, pottery, metals, and bones joined. Samples went to labs in Guatemala and abroad for chemical and microscopic tests. Those studies help answer big questions. Where did the king grow up? What did he eat as a child? Where did the shells and jade come from? And how does the art match pieces from Tikal or Teotihuacan? Comparing new LiDAR maps with old photos and dusty field notes also mattered. The fresh digital images filled gaps. In the older records, they showed looters' tunnels snaking under the ground and revealed small platforms and causeways that earlier surveys missed. What looked like empty jungle on 20th century maps now read as a busy, planned landscape. This is how modern archaeology works. New technology opens a door. Careful hands walk through and many minds piece the story together. At Xochquitam, lasers found what the trees hid. Patient excavation kept that find honest. And a web of specialists is turning stones and bones into history. The rushed ceiling of the chamber adds a mystery. Why hurry a king into the dark? For now the answer waits in the dirt, the cracks of the walls and the glyphs on the bones, and the team isn't done digging. The tomb feels less like a haphazard stash and more like a carefully packed travel kit, one built to guide a king through a dangerous trip after death. The objects follow a clear ritual order seen in other royal Maya burials. Mask and personal adornment near the head, carved bones and lineage markers at the center, and vessels holding food and drink arranged where they would be reached by the dead. It wasn't random. Each piece had a job. Those ceramic vessels matter a lot. They weren't everyday bowls. Many were made to hold ritual drinks, including a special cacao beverage often served only to nobles. Archaeologists have found chemical traces in similar urns elsewhere that match cacao and fermented maize, meaning these were powerful ceremonial drinks. For the Maya, a cup like that wasn't a luxury. It was fuel for the soul's journey and proof of status in life and death. Jade, too, plays a huge role. The green mask is not just a decoration. Jade symbolized life, growth, and the heart of the maize plant, ideas tied to fertility and rebirth. Placing jade near a skull or chest could mean giving the dead king a new, sacred body for the next world. Spondylus shells, the spiny oysters found in the tomb, carried their own meaning. They were luxury imports, signs of long-distance trade, and tokens tied to rain and fertility. Together, jade and shell announced that this man was wealthy, powerful, and ritually prepared. The bones tell a story, too. Short inscriptions on the femurs act like name tags and short biographies. They link the dead to known ruling lines and to the divine. In Maya belief, ancestry was a form of authority. Rulers showed their right to rule by naming ancestors, performing bloodletting, and staging public rituals that proved their connection to the gods. Carving a family line on bone was a literal and lasting way to affirm heritage.